Yes.
Hi. In 2004, Robert Kennedy Jr. wrote a very in-depth article about all the fraud that happened in Ohio. And a couple of years later, HBO did a great and very upsetting documentary about how easy it is to rig the voting machines. And yet, Americans seem to reserve their outrage for wardrobe malfunctions and lapel pin misuse. And I'm wondering if when you interviewed James Baker and Ginsburg and other people who have made it about the game with no concern for anything but winning, if they count on that kind of apathy, if that's something that's discussed, that they're aware of, that, you know, people use the term weapons of mass distraction, and if that really is a pervasive part of the political process now, that people really count on Americans not wanting to care about their political process.
It's absolutely part of the strategy, and I would say that I'm not sure that it's a partisan thing. I think if you looked in the recount primer or the election primers that teach people how to win an election, that both sides have figured out that discouraging voters that's not of your persuasion is a good way to win an election. But it's hopefully through things like this film and through some of these election reforms that are going on, you know, Baker and Carter, and there are some movements, but it's discouraging when you look at how little has changed. The voting machine situation, it has at least become clear that without a paper trail, the touchscreen thing is a huge problem. Sadly, 2 months ago, I think Congress dropped the bill that would have financed improving the paper trails for most voting machines. Here in California, I think that they spent a lot of money on touchscreen machines and then realized they could be hacked. Partly that film, Hacking Democracy, which is I think the one you're talking about, revealed some of that, and people lost faith and are going back to the Ink-a-Vote or optical scan thing, which we've, in our research, seems to be by far the most reliable, because in a recount, you just open the boxes and recount all the paper things. But there's some wacky stuff, even in Florida, which I call the theme park for election reform, which they are trying, seemingly, to get it right, but they have this amazing thing now. I just was reading about it, that they passed a law that you cannot change your application for voter registration after the fact. And there's a box called the crazy box. Have you heard about this? And the box is this: if you do not check this box, your application is denied. And the box says, I hereby certify that I have not been adjudicated to be mentally unsound, and if I have been adjudicated to be mentally unsound, I have done something to prove that I had to read it 5 times, and English is my first language. There are a lot of people who, they said something like 3% of those applications have already been thrown out and denied. So, and you can imagine who would want people to, you know, what, so there is so much room for people to be skeptical and vigilant and be just on it in every possible way, and hopefully not to be cynical about it, but just to turn up the efforts to make it work better. When you vote, it should count. It should just be that easy. You should just be able to walk in, check a box, and know it's going to go and help choose the leaders of your civilization. But it's not that clear, and it hasn't gotten that much better. And yes, people will still try to play it to their advantage.
Yeah. Can I just add, too, the other thing is that part of what we see as apathy is the way that the media reports the news and what they choose to report and what they choose to keep reporting over and over and over again. I'm sure you didn't see anything about the voting machines in Ohio on Fox News, for example. It's like we have to go to places to find out these things. One of the great things in the past, I guess, 2 years, I was working up in Canada, and every morning I would go online and sort of look at different newspapers, and I saw this little article buried somewhere about all these prosecutors that were being fired for no reason, and it was just buried way down deep somewhere, and I was really outraged. And then the next day I saw something else about it, and then people started to notice, and then all of a sudden it became a big scandal, and I thought that was terrific. And, you know, and there's still, you know, of course, they had an article about it in the LA Times this week, and it was buried on the bottom of page 9, where I guess whatever the fact-finding committee, you know, came out, that people were testifying about the improprieties in choosing these people to work for the Justice Department. But it really does involve, as you said, all of us being really vigilant and searching this stuff out and trying to get the word out. And one thing that excites me about Obama, and I'm not, Obama's the perfect guy or anything. Sometimes when he's talking policy, I wish it was a little more specific. But you really see somebody trying to make an effort to raise the level of discourse, and part of the little part of me that still gets hopeful about stuff. It's been pretty beaten down, but I kind of feel like maybe we've reached this point of critical mass where everybody kind of sees what the media is doing and nobody takes it at face value anymore, and we're all kind of getting sick of it at the same time. I hope that's true. I hope it turns out to be that way.
And I feel like this issue about how our votes are actually tabulated, a point we often made on Politically Incorrect and we make on Real Time, is casinos don't tolerate that. They don't tolerate at the bank. They don't tell you approximately how much money you have. And yet we tolerate that for the very essence of our democracy. And one of the services that Recount performs is to remind us of this process and how important it is. And I feel in some ways the success by the Democrats in 2006 took some of that away. I was one of the Hollywood liberals who all election night in November of 2006, I'm waiting for Rove found an extra 3 million votes over here in Missouri and Montana. And when the Democrats rammed the table at the end of the evening and got those last 4 Senate seats, part of me didn't believe it, so I went to Fox News to see if they were reporting the same thing, and they were. So I think that this was a huge issue in a way that I think that the success in 2006 has made us think that, well, maybe this is okay because Democrats did take back the Congress, so if it's so corrupt, why didn't they do it then?
Can I just have one quick story about Jimmy Carter? When we hosted the screening there, someone said, you monitor elections across the entire world. You go to third world countries all the time and try to make sure they're fair. Why didn't you get involved in Florida? And he said, because Florida and the United States in general would not pass the requirements we at the Carter Institute depend on to decide whether it's worth our time, whether we could count enough on it being a fair election to go in and actually get involved. There's no centralized election thing, there's no standards. You vote on work days instead of on the weekends. There was like a list of criteria that the United States would not pass for Jimmy Carter's institute to go and get involved in healthy elections.
Unlike Iraq, throughout Africa, all the other places where
South
they have
America,
monitored.
all the other places he's been.
And he said what you really want is a system like Venezuela or Mexico have adopted, which is incredible. I mean, you guys are really backward in your vote. It was so stunning to hear that.
And it's good for us to know this to improve our democracy.